Hi everyone, my name is Eriko Iwatate. I'm from Regulatory Support Office. Topic of today's talk is Investigational Products, Expanded Access 101. So this topic has had many attention during COVID-19 pandemic. So more recently with monkeypox outbreak, so I want to take a deep dive and discuss what do we mean to access investigational products outside of clinical trial by using expanded access regulatory pathway. I am thrilled that Dr. Natanya Utey has joined me today. So Dr. Utey is Associate Professor of Internal Medicine, has wealth of knowledge and experience in treating her patients with investigational products using expanded access regulatory pathway. She's going to share her clinical perspective of expanded access and her experience in obtaining expanded access authorization from FDA and treat patients with investigational drugs. So I'm really glad that Dr. Utey could join us today. So this is the outline of today's talk. So by the end of this presentation, our goal for each one of you to be able to tell what expanded access is, why you would request expanded access of investigational products to treat your patient, and which types of expanded access IND to choose, who are the stakeholders in expanded access, and then when and how you request authorization of expanded access from FDA. Then Dr. Utey will discuss her clinical perspective of expanded access and her real experience with expanded access. So let's get started. So first, what is it? So once again, today's talk is about investigational products. So investigational product is a drug or biological and a device product that has not been approved for general use by the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and expanded access is a FDA program and one of actually many pathways to allow treating physicians to access investigational products. So before I talk about expanded access in detail, I thought it would be a good idea to step back and then discuss other pathways to access investigational products. So first one is clinical trial. So clinical trial is main route of access to unapproved products. Clinical trial is highly organized, rigorously conducted studies to test the hypothesis. So intent of clinical trial is to determine the safety and efficacy of investigational products. And really the goal is to generate the evidence of safety and effectiveness and ultimately bring products to the market. So patient and treating physician's perspective, the great thing is that most of the time drug and then device are free, but there is no guarantee your patients would get individual clinical benefit from participating in the clinical trial, right? And then we know that phase 1 trial in particularly, there will likely be no individual level benefit, but high adverse event rates. But what your patients are doing is that they are contributing to stockpile of knowledge, and data being generated from that will eventually help community and population as a whole in the future. So another pathway, and then it's actually fairly newer pathway to access investigational product, is through right to try. So just briefly, so right to try is a law which was signed by former President Trump into law in 2018. So intent is terminally ill patients to access investigational drug, which completed phase 1 study directly from manufacturer without obtaining permission to use from FDA. So unlike clinical trial, the goal is to access investigational drug for treatment use. And according to Right to Try website, the idea behind it was that right to trial is needed because you shouldn't have to ask the federal government to try to save your own life. So this is a direct quote from Right to Try website. So now moving on to today's topic. So the third way to access investigational product is through expanded access program. So what's confusing is that expanded access has many other names. So it's often also called pre-approval access, compassionate use, experimental use, unapproved use, and many more. So for this talk, I'm going to use the term expanded access. So expanded access is a direct term through FDA. Expanded access is a pathway to use investigational medical products outside of a clinical trial. So intent is to treat patients who have exhausted all treatment options for their serious or immediate life-threatening condition. Expanded access request is initiated and then requested by physician, and most of the time it's coordinated by the manufacturer of the investigational products. And expanded access of investigation product is authorized by FDA and requires IRB approval before it can be used to treat patients. So those are some characteristics. I also want to briefly touch on other uncommon ways to access investigational products. So one another way is to traveling to another jurisdiction. Go to other country where investigational drug is either approved there or anarchy there. So what we are also more familiar during COVID crisis is accessing investigational products through emergency use authorization, or known as the EUA. So EUA allows the FDA to make unapproved medical supplies and medications, so including vaccine and treatment, available when Secretary declare public health emergency. So as you know, COVID vaccine, so Pfizer, Biotech, Moderna, and some of the treatment like remdesivir received full FDA authorization via EUA. So just to summarize here is that accessing investigational products through FDA expanded access program is one of many ways to access investigational products for treatment purpose. So now we know what expanded access is. Now I want to talk about the requirements, so criteria for using expanded access. So patient must have a serious or immediately life-threatening disease or condition. And there is no compatible or satisfactory alternative therapy to diagnose, monitor, or treat the disease or condition. Potential patient benefit must justify the potential risk of treatment, and providing the investigational medical product cannot interfere with investigational trial that could actually support a medical product's development or marketing approval for the treatment indication. Patient enrollment in a clinical trial is not possible. So the reason may be, patients cannot travel to clinical trial site, or patients may be too sick and does not fit into inclusion criteria, or there may be no active trial. So those are the criteria. So I also want to briefly talk about ethical concern in expanded access. So because due to nature of circumstances, and we're talking about giving unapproved products to very sick patients, and patients and their family members desperately need treatment, and some situation they are hoping a miracle to happen, right? So they are particularly being in vulnerable state. So the big ethical concern in this situation is therapeutic misconception, misestimation, and therapeutic optimistic. So as you can see here, so patients and their family members who run out of treatment options have a tendency to misestimate the chance of treatment benefit, or sometimes they underestimate the treatment risk. So this problem is actually very common in both in clinical trial and investigation products expand the access for treatment. So both the setting and their desperation may work against their ability to make informed assessment of risk involved. So these therapeutic misconceptions can be prevented with a proper informed consent process. So physician can ensure that potential patients are fully aware of risk involved in this treatment. So now we know what expanded access criteria and an ethical concern and what they are. I want to talk about why you would choose expanded access over other pathways to access investigational products for the treatment use. So you may choose expanded access over participating in clinical trial because simply expanded access may be the only way for patients to receive the investigational product. So as I mentioned, there may be a situation where no ongoing clinical trial, or again, your patients do not fit into inclusion criteria for active clinical trial. Clinical trial is maybe not enrolling participants because investigator reached the target enrollment, or patient may also have a geographic problem. As you know, clinical trial is historically conducted in major academic centers, so patients in rural area cannot participate. Patients may be also too sick, or having financial issue results in inability to travel to the trial site. There may be also circumstance where bridge gap between the end of trial and availability of a treatment in the marketplace. So perhaps pending FDA approval before general population can access. So these are all valid reasons and justifies choosing expanded access over clinical trial to treat your patients with serious or immediate life-threatening disease and conditions. So now, why would you choose expanded access over right to try? So it's actually really the choice of patients and physician, as well as manufacturer agreeing to provide the investigational products. So I summarize the main difference between expanded access and right to try in this slide and in the next slide. So one big one is that right to try is only for drug and does not apply to phase 1 drugs. So there's no access to early products. There are no FDA or IRB oversight. So as long as manufacturer agree to provide investigational drug, treating physician does not need to contact FDA or IRB under right to try. So these are important considerations you want to think. Also, this is just a really recent changes, but when right to try became a law, it did not have reporting requirements for FDA. But there's a new requirement since last month, November, that manufacturer providing investigational drug under right to try must submit annual summary of investigational drugs to FDA. So just so you know. So this table summarizes the characteristics of 3 main pathways of accessing investigational products for you to reference. So now I want to talk about types of expanded access IND. So there are different types as well as different categories of expanded access available through FDA. First, there are 3 distinct tiers of expanded access based on size of group. So single patient, intermediate size patient population, and large patient population. So single patient is for 1 patient, and intermediate size population IND actually has no fixed numerical requirements, but it is for more than 1 patient and size smaller than the large population. So typical of treatment IND. Now I want to break down single patient expanded access into 2 categories. So single patient emergency use and single patient non-emergency use. So emergency use is allowed when situation requires a patient to be treated before a written submission can be made to FDA and IRB. So initial request and FDA authorization can be made over the phone, and a formal written request can be made retrospectively, so after treating patient. Paperwork must be submitted to FDA within 15 working days of using investigational products. And there are no prospective IRB requirements. So similar to FDA reporting requirements, there are retrospective reporting requirements for the IRB. Paperwork must be submitted to IRB within 5 days of using investigational products. In a non-emergency situation, a written request for individual patient use of investigational drug must be received by the FDA before shipment of drug. And IRB approval must be obtained before it can be used to treat patients. So now for each category of expanded access, there are 2 types of regulatory submissions to FDA that can be made. So first one is expanded access IND. So new IND submission is intended only to make a drug available for treatment use. For example, it's expanded access IND. So it is used when there are no existing IND and sponsor, so the manufacturer of existing IND perhaps decline to be sponsor of expanded access use. So the second option is expanded access protocol submitted as a protocol amendment to an existing IND. So it's known as the expanded access protocol. So this is used when there is existing IND in effect. So the sponsor or physician may contact the appropriate FDA review division for a consultation about which may be the most appropriate submission. FDA generally encourage the submission of expanded access protocol rather than new expanded access IND. That's because having no expanded access use and clinical trial use consolidated under a single IND may facilitate the administrative review process. So now, who are the stakeholders? There are 4 main stakeholders in expanded access process: physicians, manufacturer of the investigational products, FDA, and IRB. So once again, expanded access is requested, initiated by physicians. Manufacturer must agree to provide products, and expanded access request must be authorized by FDA and approved by IRB for non-emergency expanded access requests, and must be notified for emergency requests before physician can use them to treat patients. So please note, regulatory support office, so we facilitate in each step. We can help in finding the manufacturer contacts, getting letter of authorization and letter of concurrence, for the device from manufacturer. We assist physician in preparation of FDA expanded access application. We submit those applications on behalf. We assist in responding to FDA inquiry if any. We also assist with obtaining IRB approval and IRB concurrence. We will provide the required documents, templates, and informed consent as well. So now I want to talk about time. So the time required to obtain expanded access authorization. So these figures are from most recent FDA expanded access program reports that was published in 2018. It shows the turnaround time in days by center for each types of expanded access requests. So emergency requests for single patient are regularly reviewed by CDER and CBER in less than 1 day. So in CDRH for device, medical emergency device use does not require prior notification or authorization from FDA, so it's not reported here. In contrast, non-emergency requests for single patients take much longer, between 8 days and 26 days. Intermediate-sized patient population and treatment IND or protocol requests had a review duration actually in line with typical IND review process, so less than or at 30 days. Treatment IDE are rarely used for expanded access, and they exclude it from this analysis, so it's not reported here. So according to the same report, the total time required to complete expanded access application, including submissions to all relevant stakeholders and other required coordination, can average about 30 hours for a single application. So in the same report, FDA surveyed 139 physicians with direct experience submitting expanded access application to FDA, and surveyed physicians and stakeholders suggested that these time varies between physicians because of the difference in working familiarity with expanded access application. And it also varies between academic institutions because of resource available to support application within the institution. So this FDA reports highlighted that without dedicated staff to support clinical research, the administrative burden to apply for expanded access and comply with required monitoring and reporting falls on physicians and their administrative staff. So the good news is that at UT Southwestern Regulatory Support Office, we can help with expanded access requests, and we will submit on behalf for you. So the time you would spend to request expanded access request is much shorter at UT Southwestern. So now let's talk about actual steps and how we can assist. So once again, for true emergency use, if in the physician's opinion, immediate use of the test article investigational product is required to preserve the patient's life, and the time is not sufficient to obtain IRB approval or notify the IRB, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, physician may start the treatment immediately upon verbal FDA authorization for the drug. And once again, there are retrospective reporting requirements for IRB and FDA as indicated here. Now I'm going to provide general expanded access steps for non-emergency expanded access investigational drug or biologic products. Step 1, physician discuss treatment options with patient and assess if your patient meets expanded access criteria. Step 2 is to identify expanded access treatment. So there are mainly two resources a physician can start to find products that may be available through expanded access. So in the United States, there actually is a law when drug and products are in the development of phase 2 testing. So phase 2 is you start looking for efficacy, not just for safety. So developing company, so the biopharma company, is required to have a publicly available expanded access policy. So it's really company's choice. Company could say we don't offer expanded access, or we do offer, but after the end of phase 2. So whatever they say, it's their choice, and then those information needs to be publicly available. So Expanded Access Navigator website has a company directory web page that includes a list of pharmaceutical companies and drug manufacturers developing investigational drugs for marketing. And also it includes information about the availability of the drugs under expanded access. So you can check their website. And another place to look for available expanded access is FDA's Project Facilitate website. So which is the Oncology Center of Excellence Project Facilitates call center to assist oncology healthcare providers or regulatory professional in requesting access to investigational therapies for patients with cancer. And another place to look for expanded access program, existing expanded access program, is clinicaltrials.gov. So once you use those resources and then identify investigational products, you will read company's policy on expanded access. Then you're going to contact the manufacturer and request permission from manufacturer and obtain letter of authorization or letter of concurrence. And then you will fill out whatever the paperwork requires from manufacturer. So these are some resources here. So the step 3 is choose types of expanded access IND. So usually at this point, a physician probably knows the patient size and the types of expanded access IND to request after talking with manufacturer and our team. And then step 4 is to request authorization from FDA. It's pretty straightforward, and all required forms and cover letter templates are available on our website, and then we will send all these required documents to you to fill out. And single patient non-emergency request can be submitted by email, CDER NextGen portal, and e-request. Again, we will do this part, but just for your knowledge, CDER NextGen portal is for the drugs only. E-request is for drug and biologic investigational products expanded access request. And they also allow some of the emergency requests, such as brincidofovir to treat monkeypox. And then the investigational biologic product is through email. Step 5 is to request IRB approval. So actually step 4, which is requesting FDA authorization, and step 5 can be performed simultaneously. Depending on the types of expanded access, IRB approval process is slightly different between single patient expanded access and intermediate and large population. For intermediate size and large population, so convened IRB review, so the full board review are required. So just like regular research IND study and clinical trial. For non-emergency individual patient, single patient expanded access IND, FDA waives the requirements for review and approval at the convened full board IRB meeting. So instead, IRB chairperson or another designated IRB member can provide concurrence before treatment use begins. So this new process significantly reduced the time to request IRB approval, right? It usually takes just 1 day. We will facilitate that as well. So these full board review waivers can be requested by physicians completing Form 3926 on the right with the box in field 10B selected, and physician needs to sign the form. This waiver is actually only appropriate for single patient expanded access for initial submission, and any amendments such as change in the use or duration of treatment, even continuing review for the single patient expanded access, if applicable. Step 6 is to contact SPA and submit treatment use agreement, known as a TUA, only if the manufacturer requires an agreement to be signed. So the TUA is a contract between UT Southwestern and the drug company outlining their legal responsibilities for expanded access request. UT Southwestern does not require emergency access contracts unless the company states it is required. So SPA requires e-agreement submission from the PI and study team, which you would need to provide IRB numbers and documents such as informed consent and FDA authorization letter. Step 7 is to coordinate shipment of investigational product with appropriate pharmacy. Step 8 is to obtain informed consent using IRB approved informed consent. Step 9, so after obtaining informed consent, physician can treat patient with investigational products. And here be sure to monitor for the adverse events and note treatment outcomes. And if any, next step is physician must report a serious adverse events that occur during treatment as a suspected adverse reaction, only if there is evidence to suggest a causal relationship between the investigational drug or products and the adverse events. Similar to IND requirements, treatment physician is required to submit protocol amendment if they have made changes to treatment duration or treatment plan. And also if the treatment goes to like longer periods, like 1 year, then you would need to submit annual report as well. And then we have templates for that. IRB requires post-expanded access treatment reports to be submitted as well. So you would submit for single patient, non-emergency and emergency use, you will need to submit this U2 form, emergency use post-notification. And step 11, it's the final step, is to submit summary of expanded access to FDA and to withdraw or close the IND. So we have a cover letter templates available. So in the cover letter, include reason for withdrawal, duration of the treatment, any occurrence of adverse events, consider possible drug related, and synopsis of treatment final outcome, either patients survived or died. Also include information on disposition of the drug and IRB status. So has IRB been notified or not? You need to include those information. and you would submit it along with Form 3926 and via CEDAR NextGen portal or expanded access e-request. So this concludes my portion of expanded access. So now I'm going to pass over to Dr. Utey to discuss clinical perspective of expanded access. Dr. Utey?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss my experience with single-patient expanded access medications. I am an associate professor in internal medicine and the Division of Infectious Diseases and Geographic Medicine. I'm also infectious diseases service line chief at Parkland. First, I will provide some background as to why I needed single-patient expanded access medications. In April of 2022, a UK resident who was in Nigeria developed a rash. He returned to the UK on May 4th, and the diagnosis of Mpox, which is what was formerly known as monkeypox, was suspected. 2 weeks later, the first person in the United States presented with Mpox. And on June 6th, Dallas County reported its first case of Mpox. The outbreak spread from there. Of note, there is no approved treatment for Mpox. These are some images of how Mpox can look. It starts as a vesicle, as indicated on the top left, develops into a pustule, which then umbilicates. On the bottom, you can see the continued evolution with it scabbing over and subsequently resulting in scarring. The United States government stockpiled antivirals that were developed for smallpox, which may be beneficial against Mpox. These include tecovirimat, vaccinia immune globulin, and brincidofovir. The Centers for Disease Control holds an expanded access IND protocol for tecovirimat, so we could obtain the medication from the CDC through Dallas County without going through the FDA. For brincidofovir, however, we needed to go through the FDA. Before we did anything else, we initiated discussions with the patient. And this included providing preliminary information about what data are known about the efficacy and side effects of the medication and what is not known. This is to minimize chances of therapeutic misconception. We don't want the patient to think that the medication is going to be effective when we really don't know. We also assessed the patient's risk tolerance, if the patient was willing to undertake risks of possible side effects, and this may depend on how severe the disease is. And we used an official hospital translator when needed. Then we wrote the treatment protocol, Form A2, and the informed consent, Form EM, and submitted both of these for IRB review. The IRB reviewed and edited the Form EM and provided it back to us. So the next step was to request the medication from the FDA. And to do this, we used Form 3926. This is an individual patient expanded access investigational new drug application. On this form, I provided a brief clinical history, the treatment name and company providing the medication, the dose, route of administration, duration of therapy, and monitoring procedures, my commitment to obtain IRB approval. In addition, I attached my CV to document that I had the training, experience, and licensure to provide this medication, and signed the form to indicate I would fulfill all applicable regulatory requirements. Shortly after submitting the form, I received a phone call from the FDA. Interestingly, it was even after hours. After I talked with the FDA and they approved my request, I notified our pharmacy so that they would be on the lookout for the medication. There are two ways to complete Form 3926. One, you can obtain the PDF and complete it on your computer. Or two, you can go to the Reagan-Udall Foundation for the FDA's website and complete the expanded access e-request there. Each patient requires a separate IND from the FDA. So once I received an email with the IND number for the patient, I submitted Form U1 and EM for that specific patient. I waited to receive IRB chair concurrence and a stamped Form EM for the patient I was consenting. And then I would resume the discussion with the patient with the same information that I had previously discussed, including preliminary information, assessing risk tolerance, and using a translator when needed. Then the patient would sign the consent. Next, I would scan the signed consent form into Epic, and once the pharmacy received the medication, I treated the patient. After initiating treatment, I emailed the signed Form EM, the informed consent, to UT Southwestern and Parkland's IRBs. I also emailed the completed Form U2 to UT Southwestern's IRB within 5 days of starting treatment. I submitted FDA Form 3926 and the withdrawal letter to the FDA after the therapy was completed. The withdrawal letter includes the reason for withdrawal, duration of treatment, occurrence of adverse events considered possibly drug-related, a synopsis of treatment final outcome, and disposition of the drug. It is important to report serious adverse events to the IRB and the FDA. I would like to share some tips with you I learned during this process. If you anticipate using the medication, consider writing the protocol and consent ahead of time. Also consider asking colleagues at UT Southwestern or other institutions if they already have a protocol and consent written to save you some time. Second, notify the pharmacy early in the process. IV brincidofovir needed to be handled as if it were chemotherapy because it's a potential carcinogen, so its reconstitution needed to be orchestrated with the pharmacy. Third, consider providing your mobile number to the FDA because they may call after hours. And fourth, I recommend considering administration of the medication early in the day. More clinicians would be available if there are complications. Full staffing is available on both the nursing and pharmacy fronts to deal with any issues that might arise. And this would avoid problems with shift change during administration of the medications. During this process, I encountered several challenges. First, it was difficult to figure out all the necessary paperwork I needed to complete and when it needed to be completed. It was also challenging to figure out who to contact and who needed to be notified, and when they needed to be notified of different events. But perhaps the biggest challenge was time. It takes time to write the protocol, time to write the informed consent form, time to obtain IRB approval, although I will say our IRB has been fantastic and they have been very efficient. It takes time to consent the patient, time to fill out the paperwork for the FDA, and time to have discussions with the FDA. But overall, it is worth it to give our patients an opportunity to achieve better clinical outcomes. Here is a list of expanded access resources, including UT Southwestern sponsor investigator support, FDA expanded access draft guide, FDA individual patient EA applications, EA for individual patients, intermediate-sized patient population, and larger patient populations, as well as EA contacts. We hope you enjoyed this talk and find it helpful, and feel free to contact us with any questions. Thank you very much.